Imagine the fervor the internet would go in if Nintendo debuted 2 consoles in one day. Streamers would performatively scream, crowds at the Nintendo New York City store would cheer, social media would find some fault with it. But before this whole online conversation ecosystem started, Nintendo actually did this. Back at Space World 2000, Nintendo had dual console announcements. The Game Boy Advance and the Gamecube, 2 consoles that would go on to be legendary pieces of hardware for people of a certain generation, who are now old. Nintendo had mentioned a successor to the Nintendo 64 a year prior and called it Project Dolphin. So it wasn't until this fateful Japanese expo that we would gaze upon the Nintendo GameCube in all of its 3-dimensional glory.
そしてついにドルフィンという開発名で呼ばれていた任天堂の新ハードが世界にお披露目された。その名は任天堂ゲームキューブ。
This is the type of stuff we were on in the Y2K era, clearly. It was like a blend of wrestling, Cirque du Soleil, and Las Vegas Magic Show, all to debut a video game console. Throughout Space World 2000, we'd see Nintendo execs reveal more info about both consoles. The pairing of the Game Boy Advance and GameCube bonded them together eternally, whether we realized it or not. Obviously, there was literally a GameCube and Game Boy Advance link cable, a wire that allowed people to physically connect their consoles together. This allowed players to use the Game Boy Advance as a controller, unlocked extra content, and sometimes acted as a second screen. Many games used the link cable in a variety of ways, including Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Adventures, Animal Crossing, Metroid Prime, and more. You could even transfer Pokemon from Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald onto copies of Pokemon Coliseum or XD, 2 personal favorites of mine. What can I say? I just love these weird little guys. There was a Game Boy player, an extension you could attach to the bottom of your GameCube, essentially making it a giant Game Boy.
Plug the new Game Boy player into your Nintendo GameCube and play your favorite Game Boy games on the big screen. Only for Nintendo GameCube.
This is the first sort of handheld-esque backlit gaming experience for me. This type of cross-compatibility among consoles began to inch closer together throughout Nintendo's history. We saw a lot of ties between the DS, 3DS, and Wii U, but when the Switch 1 first released back in 2017, Nintendo's true console vision came to life. All the way from those seeds planted way back at Space World 2000. Handheld plus home console, all in one package. The GameCube was a major swing for Nintendo. It was close technologically and graphically with the PS2 and Dreamcast. In that brief console war window in the late 90s and early 2000s, we'd see the PS2 dominate, outselling the Cube by over 140 million units. 140 million units? Oh my gosh. But the addition of the Game Boy Advance into that equation paints a very different overall story. The GameCube GBA combo was portable, had multiple screens and playstyles, and allowed you to play cutting-edge games. The latter point is something the Switch was never really able to do, as we are probably all aware, but that wasn't until the Switch 2 released. Which brings me to my tinfoil hat theory that the Switch 2 is actually just the GameCube 2 in disguise. Stay with me here. But before we dig a little deeper, I'd like to remind you to like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz. If you vehemently disagree with me already, please sound off in the comments below. Your anger and rage are my batteries. First thing I noticed when unboxing the Switch 2 was a shift in overall quality. This console, in comparison to its predecessor, feels more premium. You can really feel its higher price tag in the greater quality of materials used in its creation. This harkened me back to the GameCube as well. I mean, this thing is a freaking tank. It was compact, durable, had minimal moving parts. It was my first ever home console, so when I was a kid, I didn't really have anything to compare it to. But in retrospect, this thing is a lot higher quality than a Nintendo 64. The 64-bit device felt plastic and toy-like. The console itself was flimsier. The buttons trapped and absorbed a disgusting amount of dust and felt cheap when toggled. Most of all, the controllers were not built to last. As you probably know, that middle stick was always a bit off. This was always the controller I had to use at my friend's house. This kind of reminds me of the Joy-Con drift issue that the Switch 1 had. So many people's $80+ controllers were rendered completely useless. In my opinion, the Switch 2's Joy-Cons overall feel more durable. A true second draft with a lot of overall improvements, including the magnetic reattachment, covered space underneath the control sticks, and a larger size, better fitting, an adult man's hands. For the past several years, I haven't really had my Switch displayed out like that. The colorful Joy-Cons weren't made with interior design in mind and didn't really fit into the design aesthetic of my apartment. When I look at the Switch 2 now, it's markedly more mature and sleek looking. Fits nicely into a wide array of looks despite being a monocolor piece of hardware. And beyond aesthetics, the insides of this device are clearly more impressive with 10 times the graphics performance of the Switch 1, possibly the largest jump since the N64 to the Gamecube. Are you sensing a trend here? The Gamecube was underratedly premium, strong internals, fast performance, and minimal fluff. The Switch 2 seems to echo that legacy, efficient, powerful, and built for developers to get the most out of it. First off, you can literally play GameCube games on your Nintendo Switch 2 using Nintendo Switch Online. They didn't have this on the last console, so if that doesn't shout spiritual successor, I'm not really sure what else does. Not only can you play GameCube games officially on the console, they even created a purple wireless GameCube controller you can buy, which I naturally did because I am a sucker. The console's NSO service launched with Soul Calibur 2, F-Zero GX, and what many think is the console's magnum opus, Legend of Zelda: Wind Waker. And it appears a lot of classics from the GameCube's archives are on their way back as well. As mentioned, the GameCube was high fidelity graphics-wise for the time. The GameCube's lack of monetary success pushed Nintendo to innovate in a very deep sense when creating the Wii, and in my opinion, that's why we got the crazy motion controls, stuff they put in their retirement homes, which took emphasis away from graphical quality for about 20 years afterwards as a snowballed result. Focus on gameplay has always been there, but Nintendo games haven't really been known for their looks since the days of the GameCube, save Breath of the Wild and some other beautifully stylized games that win you over with art direction instead of graphical quality. The GameCube was a veritable playground for developers and served as an incubator for some of Nintendo's biggest risks gameplay-wise, with some of their most important IPs. Super Mario Sunshine was a massive change from Mario 64, placing Mario outside the Mushroom Kingdom while introducing a different, more action-packed style of platforming. Pokemon Colosseum and XD both stand out as some of the most out-of-place Pokemon games in that catalog, aiming toward a more mature audience with Shadow Pokemon, edgier character design, and gameplay that places the character in an immediately more advanced battling environment than ever before. They're basically nothing like the more lighthearted battle simulation of Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2. So the Switch 2 represents an innovative environment, much like the GameCube. So expect big swings in gameplay from first-party titles on the new console. But I'd prepare yourself for a GameCube level of innovation. It could get weird in a good way. What if the new Animal Crossing game has you managing a hotel resort? What if King Dedede is a main playable character in the next Kirby title? What if we got another Mario Sunshine where Mario's in some sort of platforming survival game on Isle Delfino? What we do know is we're getting another Kirby Air Ride, which first appeared on the GameCube, and Metroid Prime, which last appeared on the GameCube just to start. I mean, the Switch 2 only came out like 2 months ago, so the sky's the limit. To me, the GameCube's legacy lives on in the Switch 2's lineup. Weird, confident, polished games that dare to be different. It's leading with ideas. So, I always forget this, but like the GameCube has a literal handle. It's not portable in the modern sense, but it was designed with movement in mind. LAN play and memory cards also suggest modular, mobile-friendly design philosophy that was existing way back in the early 2000s. The Switch 2 is the ultimate realization of the GameCube's mobility vision, console power on the go. It gives this sort of desktop class experience with the mouse mode, but it's still portable. The GameCube crawled out of the primordial ponds of console gaming, so the Switch 2 could soar through the skies like Link in that game where he's soaring through the sky. What's it called? Link in the Sky. Link in the Sky Man. Skylink. Link the Sky Man. Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Yup, that's it. The GameCube has a handle, it had a GBA link cable, and little dreams of mobility. The Switch 2 perfects that vision. It's true power you can carry. All right, let's do some really fun price point math. The Switch 2 costs $450 USD. We're gonna be doing USD because I'm in America. Sorry. The GameCube was $199, which is $360 in today's money based on inflation. $250 in 2001 is $450 today. When looking at competitors, the PS2 was originally $299 or $560 in today's money. PS5s cost anywhere from $450 to $700. The Dreamcast launched at the same exact price point as the GameCube, but that crashed and burned, and Sega never released a home console ever again. The GameCube and GBA as a pair are basically a prehistoric version of the Switch 2. The GBA launched at $99.99, which is about $180 in today's money. So combined, these two things cost about $300, in line with the cost of the highly selling PS2. In my mind, the Switch 2 is two consoles. And ask yourself, did you have a GameCube and a Game Boy Advance? I figure a lot of people did. Maybe not bought in the same year, but over the course of their lifespan. Maybe it was a Game Boy Advance, a Micro, or an SP. You could have had a Game Boy player too. I'm not sure the Switch 2 is going to meet the financial sales numbers of the first Switch, but I believe the Switch 2 is moving Nintendo in a very positive direction. We'll just have to wait and see if the Switch 2 is truly the GameCube in form, function, and sales, which I guess wouldn't be that good. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of this video. Definitely check out the rest of my video catalog. There's probably some videos populating around my head as we speak. Bye, I love you.